In June 1941, German commanders believed their Panzer tanks were invincible. 3 weeks later, that confidence had turned into absolute terror. What they encountered on the plains of the Soviet Union was not just a tank, it was a revolution in armor that would completely redefine tank warfare forever. The metallic clang of German shells ricocheting echoed across the battlefields like alarm bells. For the first time in the war, Wehrmacht soldiers witnessed something impossible. Their 37mm and 50mm cannons, which had easily pierced French and British tanks, were now completely useless against a Soviet machine that seemed to emerge from nowhere. The T-34 had arrived, and with it, a terrifying truth that would change the course of World War II. General Heinz Guderian, the architect of the German Blitzkrieg himself, described the first encounter with the T-34 as a shock that shook our confidence to the core. His Panzer III, with vertical armor only 1.2 inches thick, now faced an adversary with sloped armor 1.8 inches thick that effectively doubled its resistance. It was like trying to pierce 3.6 inches of solid steel with ammunition designed for half that thickness. But the true revolution was not just in the thickness of the armor, it was in the angle. While German engineers built tanks with vertical surfaces that absorbed the full impact of projectiles, the Soviets had discovered that inclining the armor at 60 degrees created a deflecting effect that turned lethal shells into harmless sparks. It was geometry applied to survival, and the Germans were learning this lesson the most painful way possible. Oberst Hermann Balck, commanding a panzer division on the Eastern Front, reported in his diary, "Our shells simply ricochet. It's like throwing stones at a castle." What Balck didn't know was that he was witnessing the result of years of secret Soviet development, led by engineer Mikhail Koshkin, who had died of pneumonia just a year earlier, without seeing his creation revolutionize warfare. The T-34 was not just tough, it was fast, at 21 feet and 11 inches long and weighing 29. 2 short tons, it could reach 33 m tempo on open terrain, easily outperforming German Panzer III's that barely managed 25 km/h. Its wide tracks, 19.3 inches across, distributed its weight so efficiently that it could cross swamps and deep snow where German tanks simply sank. The T-34's superiority became evident not only in its protection, but in its devastating firepower. Its 76.2 mm 3-inch cannon could penetrate 4 inches of armor at 1,640 feet, more than enough to destroy any German tank of the era. In contrast, German 37mm cannons could barely scratch the Soviet armor even at point-blank range. Lieutenant Hans von Luck, a veteran of the Afrika Korps, described the characteristic sound of the T-34. "You heard the roar of the 500-horsepower V12 diesel engine long before you saw it. It was a blood-chilling sound because we knew our shells were useless. The diesel engine not only provided superior power, but was also safer than German gasoline engines, less prone to exploding when hit." The mass production of the T-34 revealed another devastating Soviet advantage: industrial simplicity. While a Panzer IV took 55,000 man-hours to build, a T-34 was completed in just 3,700 man-hours. The Kharkov factory alone produced 35 T-34s per day at the height of production, while the entire German industry managed to produce only 25 tanks of all types in the same period. This efficiency was no accident. The T-34's design prioritized functionality over refinement. Its welded turret was faster to produce than German cast turrets. Its parts were interchangeable and standardized, allowing for quick field repairs. While the Germans created engineering works of art, the Soviets manufactured practical and lethal instruments of war. The psychological impact of the T-34 on German troops was devastating. Sergeant Fritz Langanke, a 3-year war veteran, wrote home, "For the first time since this war began, I feel real fear. Our tanks look like toys compared to these Soviet machines." German medical reports documented a 300% increase in cases of war neurosis among tank crews after their first encounters with T-34s. The German doctrine of technological superiority was crumbling. Officers who had conquered France in 6 weeks now faced an enemy whose tanks were not only superior, but produced in unimaginable quantities. It was a complete inversion of the German narrative of industrial and technological supremacy. In December 1941, as temperatures plummeted to 40 degrees Celsius, a new dimension of the T-34's superiority was revealed. While German tanks failed to start in the extreme cold, T-34s continued to operate normally. Their diesel engines were less sensitive to the cold, and the robust design allowed operation in conditions that completely paralyzed German machines. General Erich von Manstein observed, "In the Russian winter, our tanks became sculptures of frozen metal, while the T-34s continued to hunt us like wolves in the snow." The T-34's climatic advantage transformed the Russian winter from a traditional German ally into a Soviet force multiplier. The German response to the T-34 was desperate and revealing. The accelerated development of the Panzer IV with a long 75mm cannon, the Panther and the Tiger were all direct reactions to the T-34's superiority. Ironically, the German Panther blatantly copied the T-34's sloped armor, validating the Soviet design they had initially underestimated. But it was too late. While the Germans redesigned their tanks, the Soviets had already produced over 35,000 T-34s. The production war was lost before the Germans even realized they were fighting one. The T-34 had not only changed tank design, it had redefined the very nature of modern industrial warfare. In May 1945, when Soviet T-34s rolled through the streets of Berlin, they carried more than victorious soldiers. They carried proof that simple, robust, and mass-producible engineering had triumphed over German complexity. Over 84,000 T-34s were produced during the war, making it the most produced tank in history. The T-34's legacy extended far beyond World War II. Its design influenced tanks for decades, and its philosophy of robust simplicity versus refined complexity remains relevant in modern military engineering. The tank that began as a surprise on the Soviet plains ended as a lasting lesson. In war, superiority comes not just from sophistication, but from the ability to produce, maintain, and operate superior equipment on an industrial scale. The Germans learned this truth too late, and it cost them a war.